Since Republicans won back a narrow majority in the House of Representatives, pro-abortion, anti-family Democrats only have a few days left of complete control on Capitol Hill. These final days have been fraught with fights about who will serve as Speaker of the House and back and forth between lawmakers as they try to fund the government for the coming fiscal year. And at the White House, President Biden signed the Respect for Marriage Act into law, which glorifies same-sex unions. He mentioned how devastated he is that Roe v. Wade has been overturned by, quote, the Supreme Court's extreme conservative majority. Jamie Dangers, legislative director at Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, joins me now. Jamie, thanks for joining me. Before we jump into what's going on in Congress, I wanted to get your thoughts on the fact that, again, this week, when signing a bill that doesn't even focus on abortion, the president just had to bring it up, complaining about this, quote, extreme conservative Supreme Court that overturned Roe. So what does that say about his priorities for our country, in your view?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Prudence. It is not at all surprising that he brought abortion into an unrelated conversation. He is facing a lot of pressure from his base to be as extreme and as aggressively pro-abortion as possible. And look, Samuel Alito, in his ruling in the Dobbs opinion, said very specifically that it only relates to abortion. So there's a lot of fear-mongering going on, saying that Dobbs could affect other policy areas, like Biden was saying. But I think we're seeing it in every facet of his administration, whether it's in the Veterans Administration, where now they are going against federal law altogether to fund abortion, or through the Department of Defense, where they are paying for service members to travel for abortion and making sure they can get licensed in states that provide abortion. Their policy agenda is very aggressively pro-abortion, and they're not going to let anything, even the law, stand in their way.
Yeah, thanks for being so clear about that. And Jamie, let's turn to Congress. What can we expect from Democrats in these final days where they have total power in both chambers? I know one of the major bills that's currently going through the House is the National Defense Authorization Act. And as you just alluded to, Democrats usually try to ram more funding for abortion into this bill. Isn't that right?
They try everywhere they can. The good news is, with the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA, it is must-pass legislation, and they do need 60 votes in the Senate. So that means they can't put any of their most egregious policies into that legislation. And Senator Inhofe, who is a retiring senator from Oklahoma, top Republican on the Armed Services Committee, he and his team have done an incredible job at pushing back on some of the egregious policies that Democrats have tried to shoehorn in. Meanwhile, as I alluded to with the Department of Defense policy changes, we are seeing Republicans stand up, specifically Senator Tuberville from Alabama, saying this is ridiculous. It's separate from the NDAA, but doing what they can on the Hill. He's going to hold up nominees through the Department of Defense as long as this policy remains in place. So with the NDAA, we're seeing pushback where we need it, and the Democrats do need Republican help to get it across the finish line.
I see. And the other major piece of legislation is, of course, the omnibus bill to fund the government. Democrats are saying they've reached a certain level of bipartisanship on this, but are Republicans in agreement on that?
There are varying opinions within the party on the whole idea of an omnibus. It would be better to pass each separate bill rather than one massive bill that has not gone through the committee process. That would be good governance. Right now, we are hearing that there is agreement on the actual top line numbers of how much will be spent, but we haven't seen the bill itself yet. So we don't know if Republicans will be happy or not with what comes out probably next week. But the omnibus is a new bill. So it means that there are going to be new policies in it. And so we'll have to be very vigilant with whatever comes out.
Right. And if it does end up being an omnibus bill, are there any particular riders you're anticipating that should be of concern when it comes to protecting life, as well as the safety and the well-being of families and children?
So many of our pro-life policies in law are in the funding bills. And so we always have to be very vigilant every year to ensure that none of those are taken away. For example, the Hyde Amendment, which is probably the best known pro-life rider, and the whole family of Hyde Amendments. Those are policies that restrict funding for abortion. And Republicans proved last year that they will not pass any kind of omnibus that doesn't include all of these longstanding policies. So we're expecting that those will stay in despite Democratic objections, but we're going to also be looking at the funding levels for various funding streams. For example, in the Veterans Affairs funding stream for the Office of Women's Health, we at Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America recently led a letter with about 50 other pro-life groups to Congress saying there's a request for plus-ups in funding for the Office of Women's Health at the VA. And that's fine if it's going to legitimate healthcare purposes. We want our women veterans to be well taken care of. But we're concerned because of the policy change at the Veterans Administration that some of that money could be used to implement the new abortion policy. So we're going to be working with members of Congress to make sure that whatever comes through the omnibus will be for actual legitimate healthcare and not going for abortions.
Well, Jamie, thank you so much for tackling all of these intricacies within these bills. We'll continue to keep tracking all of this. Thanks for joining us, Jamie Dangers of SBA Pro-Life America.
Thank you, Prudence.